Hi, it's Llarold. Patch 11.0.5 is coming this week, and it is pretty exciting. I mean it, this patch really has me hyped. It's crazy to think about how long I've played WoW and how big a part of my life it's been over the past 20 years, but it is really nice to see how much effort Blizzard is putting into celebrating the game in this upcoming patch. Also, I think we need a status update here. Sunset made a post about a week or so ago on our channel saying that we had a hurricane come through our area and knock out the power for, at the time, several days. That unfortunately continued for an entire week. A week without video games or a working fridge or air conditioning in Florida is not a good time. It was 85 degrees every day. Oh, it really sucked. It was so hot. I can't recommend it. We're really grateful that the studio is still here and mostly intact, and we have power back, and we're like alive and safe and all that stuff, and we can make videos again. So here we go. Now, as for what's actually coming in this patch, there is a big 20th anniversary fiesta happening outside the entrance to the Caverns of Time. I think there was ability to test this on the PTR during the week or so that we didn't have power. I obviously have, I wasn't able to log in and check that, but when I try to log in now, there are no servers to go into. But I'll just kind of show how to get to the Caverns of Time for, I guess, both Alliance and Horde characters and kind of talk about what's happening. This is a pretty huge event, and there's a lot of exciting stuff to do. I'm legitimately very excited about it. I think it's more tailored toward a less hardcore player base. Like, I'll just show off on the Alliance here. You walk up into the portal room, you look over there to the right. Boom, that's the portal to the Caverns of Time. Pretty basic. I'll do the same thing on Horde. It's a little bit less convenient, and I have kind of a big gripe to make about the state of Horde's, the Horde's portal room compared to the Alliance one. All right, here I am logged in on a Horde character, and I'm going to go in and take the staircase downstairs, and this is my big gripe here. You have to go downstairs in the portal room to get to the new expansion. It's quite a long trip down the stairs, and then over there is the Dornogal portal, which is completely insane that it is so far away, and then straight ahead in the downstairs area is the Caverns of Time portal. Pretty easy to get to, I suppose, but just really weird that they didn't put the new the new expansion portal in the upstairs area. Very weird. And so the big fiesta, the big anniversary will be in this outdoor area right around the Caverns of Time portal. And there might be like festival goers that'll just teleport you right here. Probably. Couldn't say since I can't log on to the PTR to know for sure. Now, as I was saying, I think this is all very tailored toward a less hardcore player base than myself, casuals, if you will. I know that's a term that gets thrown around as an insult, but I say it with no judgment, right? I have played this game at all levels over the many years I've played it. I would categorize myself as very hardcore now, but this patch really still hits me in a nostalgic spot, and I think a lot of the stuff that isn't competitive is still very fun and interesting. I know a lot of our last several videos have been incredibly critical of higher level Mythic Plus and higher level Delves, and the amount of nerfs that Mythic Plus received while we were without power was very vindicating, but I really do think that for a more casual audience, the game has literally never been better than it is right now. The highest level of competitive balance isn't great, but in terms of just simple, easy breezy stuff to do in the game, there is so much of it. There is so much stuff you can just log in, spend an afternoon doing, and that really makes me happy to see. And so on that note, here is kind of a quick rundown of what's in this event according to Blizzard's own post. There is a Blackrock Depths raid, and something that I thought was interesting about this, they say here you can do it from LFR up to heroic difficulty, and it's a 10 to 15 man raid or person raid instead of full 30, which I think is interesting, definitely better for people's computer performance, but also kind of an interesting idea if they were to ever go in a more 10 to 15 as kind of the minimum and maximum size for raids. I think that would be fascinating for competitive raiding down the line to shrink down from 20 to 15. Don't think it'll happen, but it would be fascinating. And then also, you're able to do the LFR raid while leveling. I think it's either level 30 or maybe level 15. You're able to just queue into that LFR and do that while leveling. This is something that they took from Mop Remix, and that had taken from Season of Discovery, and I really liked it in Mop Remix. I think it was maybe my favorite thing about that entire event. So I think it's really cool. There's also some really good looking high resolution versions of old Tier 2 Transmogs, and Paladin's obviously the one that they wanted to kind of show off. That's the flagship. I do run it on my Paladin. Everybody kind of runs this on their Paladin, and this looks amazing. But there are some other really good looking ones in here as well. The new Death Knight one, I think, maybe if it's not on a dwarf, I think it would look better. But like the Hunter one is probably the weakest of the whole set, but the Mage looks pretty great. The Warrior looks good. Druid, Priest, these look great, really well updated. The Monk one, the new Monk set, looks insane. This is easily the best Monk set they've done since Tier 14, the very first Monk tier set, at least in my opinion. This is by far the best looking one since that, and maybe even better since it is so much higher resolution, and there's definitely some particle effects happening on the shoulders, some like crackling, jade lightning, I suppose, that looks really good. Tin Storms looks good. This is the Evoker set. Doesn't look great on the human model. To me, maybe you disagree, that's fine. Warlock, Demon Hunter, and Rogue, these all look pretty good. Demon Hunter being on a male Night Elf doesn't really do it for me, but maybe on like a female Blood Elf, it'll look a little better than this, or maybe with like, I don't know, any face mask other than this weird thing that's going on here, I think might look better. But by and large, I think these tier 2 transmogs all look really, really good, other than maybe like the Hunter and the Demon Hunter. And Evoker sets. There's also classic Timewalking. This is something I've been kind of begging for a long time, probably over a decade now. I can't even remember when Timewalking was first implemented in the game, but I feel like I've been asking for classic Timewalking since like BFA. And they're bringing some of my favorite dungeons ever. Dead Mines is, it's an okay one. It's probably not the first one I would have asked for, but Zul'Farrak is one that I would have asked for, and Dire Maul as well. And they're bringing both East and West Dire Maul. I did farm. I farmed the Insane back when you had to farm all of the Shindralar rep. So I have lived in Dire Maul, all 3 wings of it, for many, many hours of my life spent there. So pretty good to go back and do East and West Dire Maul. Fascinating going back in there and just zoning into one of it. It kind of counts you as being in all of the wings at once, since they're all connected to each other. So there's something like 17 bosses in a Dire Maul. I imagine they'll be gated off from each other in the Timewalking. Either way, that's kind of cool. And then Stratholme Live and Undead Stratholme being the other 2 dungeons. So 6 dungeons, DM, ZF, East and West Dire Maul, and Live and Undead Stratholme. 4 or 5 of my absolute faves, and then also Dead Mines, pretty good set of dungeons, I think, and also something that you'll be able to do from level 10 up to max level. Also cool, something that people had asked for, being able to do Timewalking from the very start of leveling a character and being able to do dungeons at level 10 rather than having to hit like a certain weird kind of arbitrary number like level 20 for some Timewalking events and 25 for some and 30 for some. Just make it so that they're all level 10 and up. I think that's much better, much easier for newer players to understand, and that's good. There's also Drakthir being expanded out to some other classes. There's Hunters, Rogues, Priests, Mages, Warriors, and Warlocks, according to this post here. And they are keeping some of the racials, but not all of them. Evokers are going to be able to have the knock-up tail sweep, but all Drakthir will be able to do the wing blast knockback. That'll be a 3-minute cooldown, which I still think is pretty good as far as racials go, getting like more or less a Druid's Typhoon, but on a 3-minute cooldown as a racial. Pretty good. And then, just kind of cool to be able to like double jump, flap your wings on Priest, Warrior, Mage, Warlock, whatever. I think that's also pretty good. So now I'll just kind of end talking about this anniversary event by talking about the time frame. It is scheduled to start, obviously, on October 22nd, and it's going to run through January 6, 2025. And I think that's a pretty good indication of roughly when we can expect patch 11.0.7 to land. So the patch cadence that Blizzard established in Dragonflight and has said that they're going to continue through not just this expansion, but all the way through the whole World Soul Saga, so the next 3 expansions, is roughly a piece of new content, a new patch, every 6 to 10 weeks. That's a bit of a range, but I think that is roughly what they have said they're aiming for. And if we just look at this in-game calendar here, this is the 22nd, the day that the patch would be landing, and 10 weeks later would be December 31st. They're not going to drop a patch on New Year's Eve. They're also not going to drop a patch on Christmas Eve, and they're not going to drop a patch a week before Christmas. So it does make sense that they would drop it January 7th. New Year has come and gone. New year, new patch. That would be a reasonable time to expect 11.0.7 to land. I think that That really makes a lot of sense to me. And then again, if we expand out from that, kind of extrapolate out from that, another 6 to 8 weeks, another 6 weeks would be around February 18th, kind of mid-February is the earliest possible point for patch 11.1 to land. And then if we were to go, say, 2 or even 4 weeks further out from that, we're looking at early March, like March 4th, all the way out to maybe March 18th as kind of the latest that we would expect that. So pretty much, January for our next smaller content patch or minor patch, and then kind of a big, large content patch would be coming either mid-February or maybe early March or maybe even mid-March. And I think that seems pretty good, New year, new patch, spring comes along, great big content patch, new raid, new season of Mythic Plus, all of that fun stuff that we love. All right, now that is not all that is coming in the patch. There are some class changes happening. Not quite as many as I would want, if I'm being honest, but I do want to hit on some of the big ones with respect to tanks. Now, Death Knights are getting a pretty significant rework to Deathbringer in terms of a lot of talents being kind of moved around. Not really in terms of functionality. If anything, I think it's just being buffed. So I'll kind of point out some things that are staying the same. Wave of Souls, Soul Rupture, these are the same, right? All the stuff on the right-hand side, Bind in Darkness, Rune Carved Plates, and Death's Messenger, these are all the same. The only thing that's really changing is Bind in Darkness is also getting 10% more Blood Boil damage, which is just good. This talent, Wither Away, is being moved up in place of Blood Fever. Your Blood Plague is no longer going to deal extra damage of Shadow Frost. Instead, you're kind of getting that damage shifted out of that and into Bind in Darkness. But then you're getting a new choice node here of Dark Talons versus Reaper's Onslaught, whereas previously it was Dark Talons and Wither Away now just being its own standalone talent. And then they're really taking this talent here, Painful Death, kind of the coolest thing about the Deathbringer talent tree, the ability to have your Exterminate have a chance to reapply Reaper's Mark. Really cool. Really like this a lot. Makes it very strong. However, it is weird that this talent here affects a talent below it. Just strange to pick a talent and have it only work with the talent that exists below it. So what they've done is they've taken Painful Death and they've just baked it into baseline Exterminate. So now your baseline Exterminate, after your Reaper's Mark explodes, you will get 2 Marrow Rends that cost 1 rune and then come out with 2 sides and do damage and have a chance to reapply Reaper's Mark and so on. Now you can take Dark Talons, and I think that's the approach I'm going to take. The alternative is Reaper's Onslaught, which reduces the cooldown of Reaper's Mark to 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds instead of 45, but then you only get 1 Marrow Rend empowered by that Exterminate. Not really as good. It's about a 30% chance to reapply a free Reaper's Mark instead of a, 60% chance to, technically 2 30% chances. Yeah, I would rather just kind of have the chance at the bigger home run of multiple extends on Reaper's Marks. So I think Dark Talons being kind of something that's just basically being added in for free compared to the old setup is a good thing. Also, there's this new talent, Swift and Painful. If there are no enemies around for your Soul Rupture, the explosion of Reaper's Mark doing a little bit of extra splash damage. If there's nothing around to hit, if you're a single target situation, you just get a strength bonus. And then you also just get more damage out of Wave of Souls as well on your primary target. So again, I just think these are like buffs to a hero spec that's already one of the strongest in the entire game. And then just one kind of final note here on Dark Talons. While it does say that Runic Power spending abilities count as Shadow Frost while Icy Talons is active, that last line there, I did play around with this on the on live servers. I did it all the way back in the alpha. I don't think it has any interaction with Bloodshot because it doesn't actually convert these into shadow damage or spell damage in any way. They're still doing physical damage. I think they just simply count for the purposes of Bind in Darkness being able to give you extra Reaper's Mark stacks. I think that is the only way in which it counting as Shadow Frost in air quotes means anything at all, because it definitely still does physical damage. It did still seem to interact with Bloodshot. So that's kind of where I am on Dark Talons. I think it is better than Reaper's Onslaught, but, meaningfully not a huge change for Blood DK, but definitely stronger than it already was, and it's probably the best tank in the game all around. Certainly the best for Raid. Definitely not the best for Mythic Plus. Prot Warrior exists, and but Blood DK is still pretty good. Something that I glossed over and have had to like, literally come back and re-record because I forgot is a very small change to Sand Lane. Actually, kind of a bigger functionality change, but not really something that I think is going to like make it great. Is that it is now tied to Dancing Rune Weapon instead of Vampiric Blood. I think this is probably thematically worse, if I'm being honest. It does make more sense being tied to Vampiric Blood, but I think it is just better mechanically. And this is kind of a situation where function is really better than form here, so I think this is a good change, even if Sand Lane is still not really going to be all that great. Now, as for Druid, I didn't really think there were any meaningful changes. Ravage is a 20-second buff instead of 15, whatever, who cares? There was one change for Bear Druid that I thought was just more funny than anything else, and that's Lunation, the talent that reduces the cooldown of your Lunar Beam whenever you cast other arcane spells. It actually would reduce its own cooldown, so you'd cast Lunar Beam, and instead of being on a 60-second cooldown, it would immediately apply that 3 seconds and be on a 57-second cooldown, and that has been removed. You know, whatever, it's 1 GCD, but it was just kind of a funny thing that did seem like a bug the whole time, so that's fine. Monk has also gotten kind of a change. I wouldn't really call it a buff. It's definitely a quality of life improvement to have an energy tracking aura on the Shadow Pan hero talent tree. That's good. And they're also making it so that flurry charges no longer have a duration and can't be removed via like cancel aura or right clicking the buff. I think that is good. And this is important because this will reduce a possibility of like situations where you start a pull and you're 1 keg smash away from triggering all of your flurry charges, but you had a long run back in between, I don't know, a long run in between pulls or something, and so you have no flurry charges to cast, and you throw a keg smash and it instantly triggers flurry charges or flurry strikes with 1 charge. Like, that is just eliminated. I think that's good. They've also reduced the amount of energy required to trigger flurry strikes by 20%. You know, it's gone from 300 down to 240, so that's minus 60. That's good. Less damage to compensate. They've also made it require more damage to trigger or to pick up those flurry charges. It's kind of weirdly phrased here. Seems like a big wall of text, but basically what they've done is just made it so that flurry strikes will proc more often. It is easier to monitor whether they're like basically just how far away you are from your next set of flurry strikes. And, you know, then everything has kind of been tuned down to account for the fact that it will hit more often. So there's going to be less giant bursts out of them, but they will occur more often. It'll be a little bit more consistent, probably be better, certainly be easier to use than it was before. I think it's a good change, but it's not like great. I still don't love Shadow Pan. Now, the big set of changes really came for Protection Paladin, and most of these have come in the class tree. And just to kind of show off just a very basic, not even like looking at any of the specific talents yet, just to show off the shape of the talent tree, if you look here, and then this is the new talent tree shape. As you can see, just a massively changed shape of the bottom of the talent tree. Now, they've kind of borrowed a page from the Brewmaster, or I should say just Monk class tree in general, and made it so that a lot of the talents at the bottom of the Paladin, I was going to say Protection Paladin, but really just the Paladin class tree, aren't really throughput oriented, like just to show off the bottom 3 talents here. You have Of Dusk and Dawn, which is the old Dusk and Dawn, so, you know, that's a good one. That is throughput oriented. Some of the power from Seal of Order here has been baked into Dusk and Dawn, and that's good. Some of it's just been baked into the baseline class as well. But then you have a talent here like Divine Toll and Divine Resonance as the kind of 2-point option in that old middle tree here. Now it's Lightbearer. 10% of all healing done to you from other sources heals up to 4 nearby allies, divided evenly among them. Kind of turns you into a built-in beacon. Cool, useful, not a damage output talent in any respect, not a self-defense or damage reduction talent in any way. It just kind of makes you turn into like a healing stream totem. Again, not a bad thing, just not a throughput talent. And then again, we had Zealot's Paragon, this kind of big extend your wings and add more damage from Hammer of Wrath and Judgment. And that's been moved away as well, moved up in the tree. And now the bottom talent here is Light's Revocation. You can Divine Shield while your Forbearance is active, and you get a bit of a heal when you remove debuffs with Divine Shield. Not really a big deal. And the thing is that These really, really powerful throughput talents that were down at the bottom of the tree have just been moved up into the middle. Divine Toll, middle of the tree. Unbreakable Spirit, giving you a massive amount of cooldown reduction on Divine Shield and Ardent Defender and Lay on Hands, kind of in the middle of the tree here. Divine Purpose, very easy to get now. I'm super excited to play Protection Paladin that has Divine Purpose again. This makes me really, really happy. There's some other really good stuff in here as well. Divine Steed is just given to you for free now for being a Prot Paladin, which is pretty great. It's much easier to come over and get Fist of Justice, and it's no longer a 2-point talent. It's still giving you all the same, roughly the same effective value. It's just straight up 15-second cooldown reduction on Hammer of Justice instead of being tied to actively doing anything. So that's, I would argue, more consistent, probably better. And then finally, there's this new talent, Imperial Ward, that gives you, or I guess I should say, your target of your Lay on Hands, a massive armor buff. And the way that this has been working in testing is that it is like after all buffs, all bonuses. So you can cast Shield of the Righteous, get your armor way up, and have this there, and just be at the armor cap, just be at max damage reduction from armor, which is completely insane, especially when you consider talents like Unbreakable Spirit giving you a massive amount of cooldown reduction on Lay on Hands, 3 minutes off the cooldown. You have Uther's Counsel also giving you potentially 3 minutes off the cooldown. And then you have a talent like Tyrion's Devotion giving you a decent amount of cooldown reduction on Lay on Hands as well, somewhere in the 2 to 3, about 2.5 to 3 minute range on your Lay on Hands cooldown, and then just this unbelievably strong defensive cooldown from Imperial Ward. Now, I did see some people saying that this had maybe been removed. It's possible this will be removed or nerfed for protection. That would be disappointing. I would be kind of a little surprised since this is such a big selling point for protection in the coming patch. But, if it gets nerfed, it gets nerfed. Yeah, it is what it is. It's definitely looking very strong so far. One other talent here to point out is Face Armor, which just is another 20% bonus armor over the top of Shield of the Righteous. Doesn't work quite as conveniently as Shield of the Righteous. It doesn't have like the stacking duration increase that where you can Shield of the Righteous multiple times in quick succession and have like 13 seconds of the buff. It just simply is an extra 20% armor, but hey man, 20% armor is 20% armor. Not going to complain about that, since it is now very easy to come get this talent as well. Now, for the most part, the changes to Protection Paladin have taken place in the class tree, but there is one new really good talent here, Refining Fire, that gives you just a very large amount of damage for hitting enemies with Avenger Shield. It's really, really good. I don't really have a lot of other commentary about it. It's simple. You Avenger Shield them, it does damage. Tyr's Enforcer was kind of the competitor previously, but it is a 2-point talent, and it really isn't as good. And then there's also some defensive value out of coming over and taking improved Holy Shield to get to Refining Fire. So if you can get more defensive and offensive value out of these 2 points, I think it's worth it instead of taking Tyr's Enforcer. Now, another change that has happened here is that Gift of the Golden Valkyr and Uther's Counsel have both been changed from being 2-point talents to 1-pointers. This is actually a pretty significant increase. If I just kind of look at some of my notes here, the change to Uther's Counsel and being able to take this means that you're going to have Divine Shield on roughly a 2-minute, maybe even 90-second cooldown, depending on your Holy Power expenditure with Resolute Defender. Obviously, that's crazy. I already mentioned there's the about 2.5 to 3 minute Lay on Hands cooldown as well, especially if you're taking Tyrion's Devotion and just getting this massive armor bonus through Imperial Ward. That's pretty great. And then also, if you're taking Improved Blessing of Protection and Uther's Counsel, that puts you at roughly 2.5 minute Blessing of Protection and Spell Warding cooldowns, which is pretty crazy. Another thing that's been changed is that Inmost Light, the talent that buffs Eye of Tyr, has been buffed back up to a 33% reduced cooldown. So, it was nerfed down to 25% with the late in the beta for the War Within set of tank nerfs. The duration is still 6 seconds, which is kind of disappointing, but at least the cooldown now goes down to 40 seconds again, and that is, ultimately that's really good. I think all of these changes combine, along with Gift of the Golden Valkyr, also just like Uther's Counsel now being a 1-pointer, but still having the same strength as the old 2-pointer. This gives you about a 2-minute, 2:15 cooldown on your Guardian of Ancient Kings. So all of this kind of comes together to give you a lot more cooldown reduction on all of your major cooldowns as Prot. you have a lot more damage reduction. You have a lot of just like base defensive increases. If we kind of look here at the changes, damage is being increased, Word of Glory healing is being increased, base armor is being increased. Some of this is to compensate for the removal of Seal of Order. And then also some of it is being put in to replace the removal of Strength of Conviction, this talent over here that no one ever took. The 10% armor from Shield of the Righteous, 20% damage from Shield of the Righteous, the Word of Glory healing. Like, okay, that's fine. You know, these are good buffs that Prot Pally will definitely make use of, so, you know, not going to complain. And then Blessed Hammer and Judgment Cooldown, those are going in here to replace Seal of Alacrity being removed. That's also fine. Kind of some filler talents were taken away. There's a bit more utility coming to the class, and then just a lot of really, really good buffs. And so ultimately, I think all of this coming together, I think that Prot Pally looks like they're going to be in really good shape going into the next patch. There's also a Lightsmith change that I just want to point out as well before I kind of move on. This very terrible pair of talents here, Fear No Evil and Excoriation, both just really, really weak. They've been replaced with Authoritative Rebuke, which is basically just 1 second off the cooldown of Rebuke, which is okay. Potentially 2 if you have a Holy Armament, not a huge deal. Or Tempered in Battle, which I think is a lot more interesting. And just to read it, when you are an ally holding a Holy Bulwark are healed above max health, you transfer 100% of the overhealing to your ally. I think that's really cool. The second one here, when you are an ally wielding a sacred weapon, drop below 40% health, you redistribute your health immediately and every second for 4 seconds. I think that one's a lot more interesting. This kind of functions like a Spirit Link by having your sacred weapon on somebody else. You basically are getting just a one-person Spirit Link between you and them. And to a lesser extent, I suppose, with the Holy Bulwark overhealing going to the ally, but 100% transference is really, really good. So I think this is a pretty amazing pair of bonuses here baked into one. I think this is just really, really strong for, I mean, both tanks and healers. I think you're going to make a lot of use out of this, and it's definitely very interesting. I think that Prot Paladin is really going to experience a resurgence off of this patch, which I kind of feel like I called during the beta even, that once they got those nerfs and they were not looking so hot, I felt like, just like with Dragonflight, they were going to get a big buff going into like the first minor patch of the expansion. And what do you know? Here we are. I think they're looking like they're going to be in pretty good shape. They're definitely still going to be fun. I'm not the hugest fan of either of their hero specs, but I think they've both started to grow on me a little bit over time. So definitely looking forward to playing more Prot Paladin going forward. All right, I think that wraps things up. And, you know, I think this patch looks pretty good. I think it looks really good, actually. It's really built to appeal to people who have a lot of nostalgia for the game, and that definitely is me. I think in terms of issues with the highest end of the game's tuning and the core systems of the game, things like Mythic Plus being the only repeatable way of farming Mythic level crests, or Brewmaster Mugs still being kind of a dumpster fire in Mythic Plus, that is mostly being unaddressed. I hope it's something they can at least look at via hotfix, and I probably should be a little bit more, I don't know, negative about it, but I can't help it. All of the stuff that's happening in this 20th anniversary event really has me in a good mood, and I'm just very excited for the patch. I really can't wait to get that tier 2 Monk Transmog. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.